That's amazing.
You all got to just hang in there. So it looks like it is 11:01. We are going to kick things off now. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Lauren Bihar. I'm a Senior Account Executive with Contemporary Staffing Solutions. I've been with the company for 5 years, and I'm very happy to have everyone here today. There is a new normal of doing business that is creating additional stress and uncertainty. But one thing that brings us comfort is that we are all in this together, and CSS is networked with amazing people that are ready to help you. CSS wants to offer some insight through our new HR webinar series and gather thought leaders and talent acquisition leaders to add some perspective. Today's program will last about 50 minutes, 35 minutes for the presentation, and then there will be a 15-minute Q&A. So we please ask that you hold all of your questions until the end. Our technical moderator, Nick, has muted everyone, so please use the chat feature for any questions that you might have after the presentation. If you are new to Zoom, you can hover over the top right corner and you can adjust your view. Now, I would like to introduce Evan Violette, Managing Director of CSS Professional Staffing Group, and our subject matter expert, Anna Papalia, founder and CEO of Shift Profile. Together, Anna and Evan will discuss creating new skills for HR professionals in a COVID-19 world. This webinar will be in 2 parts. The first, gaining understanding around the challenges HR faces today while most companies are pausing or accelerating their hiring. Second, to gain an understanding on how HR can upgrade their skills so they can be better aligned with their hiring managers and staffing partners in a post-COVID world. It's time for new skills, so let's sharpen and upgrade our skills while we're all taking a pause. So with that said, let's learn a little bit more about Evan Violette and Anna Papalia.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you everyone for joining. We know that there are a lot of things and a lot of people competing for your time, and we appreciate you being here with us. My name's Evan Violette. I'm the Managing Director of the Professional Staffing Group here at Contemporary Staffing Solutions. I lead a team who has supported the hiring of more than 27,000 employees in temporary, contract, and direct hire roles nationwide. We are always upgrading our skills so we can deliver more value to our customers, and today we are really working to take this to new heights. The PSG team at Contemporary Staffing truly understands how great talent can make a real difference in human resources, call center, office, and accounting and finance roles. Since 1994, we have been nationally offering professional staffing, both technical and non-technical, along with managed services to our customers. We're extremely grateful for the selflessness of our hospitals and the endless efforts of the food supply and government employees, as well as all essential employees helping us stay socially distanced and safe. 3 weeks ago, Contemporary Staffing started 4 different series of webinars. Our series include health and wellness, Salesforce tips, sales team webinars, and this one, of course, our HR-focused series. Our HR series of webinars is for target audiences that include human resources professionals and talent acquisition leaders who are currently partnering with the C-suite and leading business partners with remote employees who are adjusting to the new way of doing business. I would like to take a second to introduce Anna Papalia, CEO of Shift Profile. Anna focuses on improving your hiring process, achieving your organizational goals, and empowering your employees to make a difference. Prior to starting Shift Profile in 2011, Anna was the Director of Talent Acquisition for an insurance brokerage. In that role, she was the corporate gatekeeper, hiring all levels of talent from entry-level mail clerks to executive vice presidents. With her vast interviewing experience on both sides of the table, Anna developed a personality assessment to determine one's interview style. Anna has taught over 300 interview skills workshops and prepared over 5,000 hiring managers and job seekers to interview better. Anna is an HR consultant that leads a team of HR subject matter experts to help you and your organization make the best decision around talent and strategy. Today, Anna and I will talk about creating new skills for you and your HR teams so that you are better prepared in a post-COVID world, as well as how to address HR and teams and in your current teams to add more value while we get through the COVID-19 crisis. Let's break down how human resources teams can be agile in a world that has drastically changed and proactively prepare for returning to business better, smarter, and faster than the competition. I would like to turn our attention to Anna so our program can begin. Anna, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Evan, and thanks, Lauren. It's nice to be with you virtually.
So Anna, as I mentioned, we're really, we've got a lot of, talent acquisition and HR professionals here with us today. And our first part is really discussing and gaining an understanding around the challenges that HR faces today. While most companies are pausing and some may be accelerating their hiring. Our current situation is challenging at most companies, whether your company is on a hiring freeze or if they are acquiring talent at an accelerated pace. Anna, as an HR consultant, I would like to tap your experiences in our first part. You have a very unique background as a high-level HR director, University of Penn graduate, psychology major, and you have seen the hiring through an agency and corporate lens throughout your career. Of course, these are unprecedented times for all of us. So Anna, my first question for you is, how can we learn from the tough situations that HR finds ourselves in and grow our skill set today?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to address that HR partners, talent acquisition teams, and business owners have all been thrown a gigantic curveball, and there is no guidebook here. So what we're going through is very, very difficult. Whether you, like you said, your business is in a hiring freeze, or whether you're going through business as usual, albeit virtually, we've never done anything like this before, but I'd like to today in our conversation give you some tips and some tools to use while you're either in a hiring freeze or going through business as usual virtually. There are some things that we can do right now. And what you do right now is going to change how you come out of this, because we don't know if it's going to be 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, but we will come out of this eventually. And what you do now will depend on how strong and how lean your organization is at the end.
Yeah, that's a really, I guess the top of mind topic for all of us is when we will come out of this. And I think I agree with you, Anna. One thing's for sure, we definitely will. And there's an opportunity in front of us to come out of this stronger. There's a lot of challenges right now with companies that are just not hiring. And, in fact, some companies are doing quite the opposite, and they're furloughing and laying off. So Anna, we often get asked by our customers in talent acquisition, how can they be adding value when their company is presently on a hiring freeze?
I am so sensitive to this. I feel at heart I am a recruiter. Previous to starting Shift 9 years ago in 2011, I was a director of talent acquisition. And I can imagine that any HR business partner or recruiter is asking themselves, how do we add value if we're not recruiting? And I would say that this is a wonderful time to do that. How many times in your professional life have you sort of begged the universe, like, if I could just have a pause for a minute so I could work on this project or figure this thing out? And I'm an optimist at heart, so that's how I really prefer to look at all of this, not as a quarantine or a lockdown, but as a pause and an opportunity to get some things accomplished, some of those back burner projects. If you are in an organization that's on a hiring freeze, your talent acquisition team or HR department can add enormous value by upgrading some of the things that you usually don't have time to do. The first and most important is your interviewing procedures, how you interview. 90% of hiring managers that we work with tell us that they were never trained to interview. They Google it, they wing it, or they shadow someone. I believe that the most important business decisions are made in interviews, and I think it's very strange that we don't give our hiring managers tools backed in science and research. So one of the first things that you can do is that a hiring freeze is a great opportunity to train your hiring managers how to interview better, how to get everyone on the same team. I have lots of clients who have actually expedited their training because they know that they won't be hiring full-time or a lot for the next 3 to 6 months. So we're taking this opportunity to get everyone on the same page. I think what's also really important to say is that just because you're not hiring actively doesn't mean that you can't keep recruiting, keep that pipeline full. Eventually we will, whether it turns back on full blast or if it's a slow drip, you're going to need candidates in the pipeline. So take this time to build relationships with staffing agencies, build relationships with those candidates that are in your pipeline, keep them warm, and communicate with them honestly throughout this process. And that's going to be what's so important for all of us going forward is communication. Everyone is really craving more connection. And if you can connect with someone authentically, it's not only a great way to sell your organization, but it's a great way to brand your company. Your employees and prospective employees are going to remember that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know, in a lot of the HR seminars that I've joined over the last few years, we often talk about the candidate experience as a way of differentiating. And, I think that a lot of HR and talent acquisition folks recognize just how important that is. Anna, what would you say are the common pain points that HR professionals have trying to advise the hiring managers throughout the process?
Sure. So, I think there's two parts there. Candidate experience is certainly another project that you can take on in this pause. It's a trendy phrase right now, but going forward and even in these times, you have to think really critically about what you put your candidates through before they get to an interview with you. Are you doing recorded interviews? Do you have them fill out a cumbersome, tedious, and awkward application, pre-employment assessments? How much time does it take before a candidate can get through to you? And that all will diminish the level of candidates. If you're trying to attract top talent generally doesn't have the time to jump through all of those hoops. So I would look very carefully at that and also ask yourself what truly adds value to the process. Those recorded interviews, I bet they don't add too much value. It's one of those things you're just checking the box. So audit that process. And the second part of that question, I'm sorry, Evan, what was the second part of that question?
Just ultimately, what can they do to advise or drive more value from the hiring managers in the process, right? We talk a lot about the candidate experience, which you referenced, but it doesn't always trickle down to the hiring manager. There may not be as much of an emphasis on the candidate experience from the hiring manager's seat.
Mm-hmm. I would say that I have co-interviewed with hundreds of hiring managers. Some are a dream, some are difficult. I get it. I've sat in that seat before. And I think one of the best ways in how I advise current clients is to make your hiring managers a partner in the process. It is easy to try to tell them the way you want to run the position or how you want to do the interview process, but it's much better if you ask some open-ended questions and make them a partner and an advocate in the process. That way, if you are a subject matter expert, they'll look to you and they'll lean on you for advice when it comes to candidates, because ultimately, as an HR person, you are a consultant in the sense that you are advocating for employees and prospective employees, and you're sort of guarding that company culture. And if you do that well, hiring managers, and if you lead with your heart and they see your authenticity, hiring managers will know that you are the go-to person when it comes to that. Hiring managers have a tendency to need their position filled, and they will not be so patient with some bureaucracies or rules or things that they have to do. But if you've set a tone and a standard that you are the subject matter expert and you provide resources and training and help around interviewing, such as great interview questions to ask, great interview guides, they're going to come to you and they're going to use you as a trusted resource and advisor.
Absolutely. And, we always talk about what better time to do it than now, when the roof is still intact and, people may not be focusing on hiring. Sometimes that's the best time to refine the process. So thank you, Anna. Those are some really great ideas on driving collaboration from hiring managers. Obviously, Anna, we're in a temporary recession, and, you've talked a little bit about how HR can add value from a hiring perspective and onboarding perspective, but let's delve a little bit deeper and really discuss what ideas maybe you're providing your customers with, so that HR can provide more value and increased value through this temporary recession. I think oftentimes we look back at the recession in 2008 and it was very much a financial focused recession, but with the pandemic, there's no secret that HR is very much at the forefront of driving solutions. So from your perspective, Anna, what are some of the ways that HR can continue to add more value as we navigate through this?
I think first and foremost, this is teaching us both professionally and personally, what do you need versus what do you want? And I think as business owners and HR business partners, we need to look really critically at maybe the succession plans we had pre-COVID, and what are the succession plans going to look like post-COVID? Take a real critical look at your organizational structure and how you conduct your HR business. Now is also a great time to think about your mission and the values of your organization and do an audit. Are they aligned? Are you communicating these things, not just in interviews, but to your employees? This is how HR truly adds value. You can innovate some of these processes as well. You can create a more dynamic IDP process or evaluation process. You have time now to do some of these projects that really go to the wayside, and it is truly the way HR adds value. With one of my clients, he's somewhat in a recession-proof business, luckily, but he has slowed all of his hiring. So we've spent a lot of time working on developing his mission and his values for his organization. To do work like that, you often need some time to think deeply and be creative. So I encourage you to use some of that time now to do some of that thinking.
That's great. And Anna, we're going to bring it back a little bit to the hiring process because, I think that we are constantly, even in the best of times, looking to identify and, like you said, position ourselves as the subject matter experts in HR and talent acquisition to really drive more collaboration from the hiring manager. I want to kind of shift gears and focus a little bit more on the hiring manager's involvement in the hiring process. And, in your perspective, Anna, throughout the interview process, what have you found is the number one thing that hiring managers may do poorly or could ultimately improve upon?
That they do poorly in interviews? The number one thing? Poor hiring managers, we do pick on them. But I would say that there are a couple things. I would say the first thing that hiring managers do poorly, and it's a lot of times because they're very busy and they don't prioritize interviewing, is that they don't prepare. They don't read a candidate's resume, and they especially don't create great interview questions to ask. And that really leads into the second thing that hiring managers do really poorly, and that is they talk a lot. An interview, according to the EEOC, is a test, and it should be conducted like that. It should be a set of questions that you ask. And I think one of the hardest things for hiring managers to understand is that they need to talk 20% and listen 80%. For instance, imagine, and I'm sure you've seen this many times before, you greet a candidate, you do your chit chat, and then you launch into a little bit about your department and the role, and you keep talking. For now, you've been talking for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you've revealed all the things that you need. You've told this person that you need someone who's a great team player. You need someone who has a great attention to detail. You've told them about your management style. You told them about the office culture, all these things that we do to try to welcome somebody. And then you say, so why do you want to work here? And that candidate, if they have, 2 brain cells, they're just going to regurgitate back to you everything that you just said. And the hiring manager is going to look at the recruiter and say, well, they're perfect. Well, not really. You didn't really ask them any questions and let them answer. So I think our biases get in the way, especially if you want to hire somebody, whatever they say sounds really good, the position's open, you need it filled. So I would encourage hiring managers to take the time to prepare, work with your HR business partners or someone like myself to create great interview questions that you ask every candidate. And number 2, talk less. It's called telegraphing. Don't tell the candidates what you want. Simply ask a question and let them answer it. And if it's not the answer that you want, don't keep giving them more information. Hiring managers have a tendency to say, well, what I was really looking for, what I was hoping you would say, and then they're just going to regurgitate back what you want them to say. And these are very difficult for hiring managers, especially hiring managers that want people to like them, that want to make a good impression. But it's not a great way to investigate or to determine if someone is going to be a good fit. And that should be your mode in an interview. Be somewhat of a detective, ask great questions, and let the candidate answer.
Wow. Yeah. Geez, Anna, I think as recruiters and human resource people, I'm sure we've never heard anyone tell us to talk less, right? It's oftentimes what makes us do what we do, that we're good at communicating with people.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of, I'm sure we could keep peeling layers back here, Anna, but, I think there's a lot of differences between what HR sees in a successful interview and what a hiring manager does. And could you just take a few seconds to delve into some of those differences through your experience working both with HR and the hiring managers? Maybe there's a really good candidate and HR is in love with that candidate. Hiring manager just doesn't see it that way. What are some of the reasons for those differences?
Sure. Yeah. So previous to my role as an HR consultant, I was a director of talent, responsible for hiring for the entire organization. And by the time I left, I had hired 80% of that company and built all of the programs that they're still running to this day. And so I have been in the trenches. I have been an HR person, and now I have been on this other side of this table for 9 years. And over these 9 years, I've conducted a lot of research because when I was a director of talent, I often thought that and felt that I was very unprepared, that there was no formalized language, that there were no tools to help hiring managers with just this. So in the research that I've conducted, I created a personality assessment to determine someone's interview style. And what we test is levels of introversion and extroversion, and levels of mastery and accommodating styles. So to your point, Evan, lots of HR people tend to be more extroverted and more accommodating. And their bias will generally be people that are extroverted and accommodating. We call those people open diplomats. And whereas maybe you might be partnering with a hiring manager who's a more technical person. From my personal experience a long time ago when I was recruiting for some accounting candidates, I remember having a long day of interviews and going back to my desk and being really frustrated that I didn't click with anybody, that I didn't have that feeling that I needed to trust to hire somebody. And I'll never forget this moment. I thought, well, why does an accountant need to click with me? Why do I need to feel this warmth of connection? This is not what they need to do their job. And I had this light bulb moment that forever changed my career. And that was that I thought, am I biased? And in that moment, I realized that there were great candidates, but I was looking at it through a lens of someone that I wanted to hire because I wanted them to be like me. And so my challenge after that, and my challenge for the last 9 years, has been to encourage hiring managers to make more open-minded decisions and be more open-minded in interviews and set aside what you want personally and think about what you need for that job. What do you need in that role? When it comes to HR and technical hiring managers, I think it's good to get everyone on the same page and accept your opposites, right? We all need each other. So I'm really glad that there are some accountants and actuaries, but they generally tend towards being my polar opposite. And we're actually great interview teams. The best interview teams are diverse interview teams. So it doesn't have to be a conversation of, butting your heads between HR and technical people. It could be, using their strengths and your weaknesses to balance each other out.
Wow. Sounds, it sounds like it can work, and you've obviously seen that begin to work with a lot of your clients, Anna. And I know the second part of it, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the different personality styles and the unconscious bias. Anna, you mentioned, obviously in your experience, you're hired to do some HR consulting. And we're seeing that a lot of companies, particularly smaller companies, are outsourcing the HR component of their organization. What are some of the reasons that companies are outsourcing their roles to HR consultants? And the second half of my question is, what are some of the problems that HR departments and consultants are really working to solve today?
Yeah, sure. So most of my clients through HR and retainer are small to mid-sized businesses that don't need a full HR department, and they certainly don't need to spend 6 figures on an HR director full time. But just because you don't need a full-time HR department doesn't mean you don't have HR issues. And we all need policies, and we all need to enforce those policies. So my organization, as an HR consultant and as a lot of HR consultants, you act as that outsourced department. So you can provide an employee handbook, for example. You can do a card sort to help a CEO figure out their mission and values. You can create employee evaluation plans. Obviously, you can also be there for employee relations issues and not on a full-time basis. I think what we provide is a support and an ear to CEOs who need someone to go to when they have an employee relations issue, or they wonder, how am I going to promote this person or demote this person, or what's going to happen? So you always have employee needs, how to motivate them, how to fire them, and everything in between. So that's what we're there for those small to mid-sized businesses.
That's awesome, and thank you for that, Anna. I know we are getting towards the end of our first part, and I want to speak a little bit more specifically to the current circumstances, as if we haven't spoken enough about COVID-19. The reality is that it's changing how companies and future hires think, and there's a lot of philosophies out there that believe the supply is going to go up without geographical boundaries. And, the thoughts behind that are really driving that the demand will go up for more highly skilled employees and possibly at a more fair market value. So I'm just interested, Anna, can you comment on that and possibly, what your thoughts are for the supply and demand in a post-COVID-19 hiring market?
Sure. I think the fact of the matter is that we're all operating without any real true information. The last time the world faced a global pandemic, it was in 1918, and the world has changed so much since then. And as business leaders, we make decisions using data, and we really don't have any. One of the things that you may want to do is put on the brakes and stop and go dark. And another thing you may want to do is push on the accelerator and go really fast. I would advise you to do something more in the middle, because we don't have any data and we're not sure what everything is going to look like. And I know we all hope and pray that, this will be like a blizzard and, on June 10th, it'll be over, and on June 12th, we all go back to work. But it's not going to be like that, unfortunately. And we're not sure how slow we are going to be to get back to work. So we are going to have to hire virtually, and let's face it, that's harder. Virtual interviews are more difficult, especially as people. We pride ourselves on making a connection in person, feeling the energy of the room. So even these things, virtual speaking engagements, virtual meetings, are more difficult and something that we have to get used to. I think that it's something that we're going to have to feel our way into and use our best practices. In the meantime, like I said at the top of our call, I think that what you do now is going to change how you come out of this. So you can ask yourself really critical questions about what you need versus what you want.
That's really profound, and what you need versus what you want. I think my wife tells me that quite often. Do I need it or do I want it? That's it's really true in these circumstances. So, and it's unfortunate because you can't go on social media and without being reminded of different populations and generations that are really being affected by this. And I want to call attention to the college graduates and the upcoming college graduates. If you don't mind, tell me a little bit about your experience working with local college students.
Sure. I think our hearts go out to everybody that, missed a high school prom or graduation. My son turned 5 in coronavirus lockdown. We had to cancel a birthday party. And everyone is facing these strange challenges, but no one more than these college graduates. Not only are they graduating in a virtual environment where they're going to have to virtually look for a job and virtually interview, but they're also graduating in a very slowing economy. There was a recent study done that almost 70% of organizations are going on a hiring freeze or stopping or slowing hiring dramatically. So can you imagine being a senior saddled with $250,000 of debt? College students are so nervous about what they're going into. And just like HR people, there's no guidebook. They don't know exactly what to do. I've actually taught at the college level for 9 years. I work with Temple's Fox School of Business to teach all the juniors and seniors how to interview, prepare for internships and full-time jobs. And I feel for all my students, it has never been a time like this. So they're coming into some very serious, very difficult, very unprecedented times.
Thank you for that, Anna. And, to wrap up our first part of our conversation, we oftentimes hear about, how companies are staying connected and how they are continuing to drive their culture. Zoom happy hours, different fun games that they're doing online. We're finding new ways to stay connected. That's for sure. My question to you is, how can we as HR leaders train our employees and colleagues from a high level to really take advantage of the opportunity to be working from home? As you mentioned earlier, there may be some extra time on our hands, and for many people there may not be, but there is an opportunity here for a lot of companies that were forced to go to a working from home model. So what advice would you give us in terms of how we can work with our employees and colleagues to take advantage of the opportunity?
I heard a recent quote, which I thought was so great. Someone said, we're all in the same boat in this together. And someone else said, no, we're not in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but our boats all look really different. And I think you have to take that into consideration with employees. One employee's quarantine situation may look like may be totally different than your own. I, for the most part, work from home. I've come into a very empty office to do this today just to make sure that it was quiet. But I know personally that working from home is tremendously difficult. I have a 2 and a 5-year-old. I know all of my clients are in different situations and different boats. And I think that as HR people and just as people in general going through this is going to make us more understanding, more empathetic, and give us all a dose of vulnerability that maybe we needed. I feel like I've gotten to know my clients way better over the last 6 weeks than as if I had known them for 6 years. I had some really conservative clients sending me emails with curse words, and I've shared memes with people, and it's wonderful to know that, working from home isn't really easy for anybody. We don't like this. People need connection. We want to be face to face. So it's not easy. Sure, technology makes it a little easier, but when I get really down, I think about the 1918 pandemic, the Spanish flu that raged through Philadelphia and the world. And I think we are all here because those people survived. And this is part of life. And we will come out of this stronger and braver if we do what we have to do now. And thank God for Zoom and the internet and YouTube if you have children.
Right. I recently discovered YouTube Kids, so that has been our clutch. And Anna, thank God for our
and Netflix, and you have to use the tools. And we were saying this before the call started. It really has created this kind of no judgment zone for parents, and you really have to do what you have to do to get through. And I hope that as an HR director and as a consultant, my clients are getting that message that, we're here to help and we're here to be a resource, and we all get it. And let's all, check in with each other weekly, daily, because we really crave that connection right now. And I think it will make us all better in the end.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you, Anna. And, I think that, there's a lot of excellent resources becoming widely available, for mindfulness and managing stress. And I personally I know we discussed it, the challenges of working from home with a 2-year-old. It's a new ball game that we've all had to adopt and, adapt to extremely fast. A silver lining to all of this is it really does show our versatility as professionals, but also as companies and as business leaders, because I truly believe it's what we do now and how we work with our employees now that will gain their respect, their continued loyalty, and ultimately define us as a culture and a business moving forward. So I'm really proud of the many businesses and a lot of the people that are on this webinar today are parts of the solution here in driving a better company and a better culture for all their employees. Our team constantly talks about how we handle ourselves through adversity, and that's ultimately what's going to define our character. And many of the people that we're talking to are finding ways to enhance their skill sets, taking online courses to better their technological skills, and, really has us thinking about what companies can do to take a similar approach to enhance their processes and overall business. Anna, thank you for walking us through how companies can really begin doing that by taking a good hard look at their interviewing process, collaboration with hiring managers. Ultimately, it all begins with trying to drive a better candidate experience. And it is going to go back to a war for talent. And, like you said, there's no data to tell us how this will happen, but we have to believe eventually we'll get back into that war for talent. And it's going to be about what differentiates us. So, Anna, before moving to our second part, I just want to call out to everyone that we have the chat feature available for anyone that has any questions that they'd like Anna to address. We are doing pretty good on time, and we would love to have Anna address any questions that you may have. You can certainly feel free to send them to me directly through the private feature or send them out to the group. We will certainly field any questions that we have at the end of our conversation here. So, with that being said, Anna, we're going to move into the second part. And, our focus is gaining an understanding on how HR can upgrade their skills, starting with the interview process, so that they can be better aligned with their hiring managers and staffing partners in a post-COVID world. So, Anna, let me take my best stab at introducing your interview assessment properly, and please fill in the gaps. It's one set of questions, and you answer how you perform in an interview, regardless if you're the job seeker or hiring manager. Then you get 2 reports, both with similar information in the beginning, but different from around that halfway point, that clarifies how you might be able to improve your ability and recommend the right match for the hiring manager and the job seeker. So, Anna, please do yourself justice and fill in any gaps that I may have left there.
You did a great job. So, our interview style assessment is similar to think a Myers-Briggs or a DISC, but just for interviewing. I wanted to create a formalized language for hiring managers, recruiters, HR business partners, so they would all be able to talk with one another. Our assessment, like Evan said, is 20 questions. It's usually the average user takes it between 4 to 8 minutes. And it assesses how you are in an interview, because there's something about an interview in our research that we've realized that your personality may change just a bit. We've studied high extroverts that actually become introverted and vice versa. People that are very accommodating may become more steadfast. So there's something about that situation that we're testing. So our assessment doesn't necessarily test, it's not a holistic personality assessment. We're not testing how you are all the time. We're testing how you are in an interview. And to Evan's point, we have 2 different products. One is a job seeker profile for those college students that we were talking about that I work with. And also we have a hiring manager product. When I partner with organizations to train their hiring managers, all the hiring managers take our assessment and receive a 40-page workbook, which has everything from your levels of introversion and extroversion, what you're doing right and wrong in interviews, the impressions that you're making, your approach and style, and then lots of resources, questions to ask, things not to say, interview protocol, workbook, everything. We really wanted it to be a one-stop shop workbook for anyone to use anywhere. But if I were to train your hiring managers, we use this workbook in our trainings, and we cover everything from shaking hands and unconscious bias all the way to how do you make a decision and how do you make an offer and how do you negotiate.
Wow, yeah, that's excellent. And Anna, one of the things that you said earlier that I found really intriguing is just there's never really any training to interview. And, you know, it's so important because it's your one shot at one, you know, being the best potential employee that you can be, but 2, as a hiring manager, presenting, you know, the opportunity in the company and the culture as best you can. So, Anna, with that being said, let's start with the recruiter's perspective. Tell us how recruiters benefit specifically from this assessment.
Sure. Yeah, and I'd love to speak to that. I mean, I don't know why, but in our society, for some reason, interviewing has really been relegated to something that we think that our hiring managers are just going to figure out. A lot like dating, you know, kiss a bunch of frogs and you'll eventually figure it out. You'll find your prince. But this comes at a great cost to organizations, and it's just really a flawed approach. In addition to that, it is not the best way to go about creating a diverse and fair organization. Hiring managers are making complex people decisions, and when you make complex people decisions without training, you often make very biased decisions. You seem to follow the pack, you do what someone else did. Most hiring managers learn by shadowing someone else, so they're just repeating bad mistakes. Or worse, they learn by Googling it or learning how to interview on the internet, which I don't know how much time you spend on the internet, but there's not a lot of great advice out there. So our mission at Shift is to elevate the interview process. I want organizations to see and to look at interviews and recruiting as the most important business decision that they can make. It doesn't matter how much money you spend on diversity, inclusion training. If you aren't training your hiring managers how to make better decisions in the interview, then none of that training is going to work. So we spend a lot of time on elevating the interview process. And for my job seeker candidates and my students at schools that we work for, you know, I want this to be sort of universal. I want to teach people how to interview as job seekers and hiring managers so everyone can find not just any job, but the right job. It's so important for hiring managers, but it's just as important as a candidate. You know, you want to find a position that's right for you, not just anything. And if you're interviewing well, I can empower you with tools that will forever change your career. And that's really important to us in what we do.
Anna, you've referenced it a couple times, and it's certainly a very hot topic and one that I've really appreciated personally learning more about, and that's the unconscious bias. How can we better understand the unconscious bias that most hiring managers are just naturally bringing to the interview process?
Sure. So There's a lot of unconscious bias that we bring to the interview process. The primacy effect, the first candidate you might see, the beauty bias, someone who's good looking. We also have the self-fulfilling prophecy bias. We have a tendency to think highly of someone depending on the pool of candidates. Let's say you have a not so great pool, so the average person's going to look much better compared to those other not so great candidates. In addition to those biases, obviously we have a lot of socioeconomic biases. Where did somebody go to school? What's their name? What do they look like? What's their hairstyle? What do they wear? All of those biases, I think, are pretty common. But some of those unconscious biases that we don't talk about are race and gender. Let me share just a little science with you. So representation, as we know, matters greatly to organizations. In fact, organizations that have a young person, an African American, or a woman at the table perform better in all the metrics that stockholders and shareholders care about. Yet as humans, our biases and our heuristics keep diversity at a minimum. So there were a lot of studies done on names on resumes. Some researchers in Boston and Chicago sent out the exact same resume, and the only difference was that they changed the name on the resume. And the resumes with Caucasian sounding names versus resumes with African American sounding names only needed to apply to a job 10 times before they got a call back. Whereas if you have an African American sounding name, it needs 15 to 20 applications before you get a call back. Now, hiring managers aren't saying when they see that resume, we don't want to hire a Tamika. What they're saying is, we have some unconscious bias around what this person must be like. And that's what we need to fight in the interview process. So right now, there are actually some great things that you can be doing to increase the diversity in your organization. Number one, ask yourself, is it really important that we see someone in an interview? We have this cool opportunity that we don't have to turn on our Zoom cameras, because what research shows us is that we make very biased decisions based on someone's race, gender, how they appear, their hair, all of that. So ask yourself, could you just have a phone interview? Do you really need to see someone, judge someone's Zoom background? I know interviewing is an act of trust, but maybe you could rework this new procedure into being an act of increasing the diversity of your organization and creating some best practices around that. There's some really cool research back in the 80s and early 90s about orchestras who wanted to create more diversity because orchestras were very white male dominated worlds. So what they started doing is they started having blind auditions, literally putting a screen up for the musician so the judges could not see them. And the diversity started to go up, it started to work, but they found this very interesting thing that they were only still hiring male musicians. They did some more research and they realized it was because women wore high heels, and that when they walked out on stage, the judges could hear them. And they weren't saying, oh, we don't want to hire that woman. They would say, well, her music wasn't that great, because unconsciously they knew that she was a woman. So going forward, they changed the audition process and made everyone take off their shoes. And wouldn't you know, the diversity went through the roof. So right now we have this amazing opportunity to change the way that we interview. Take the names and take the schools off of resumes, because it doesn't matter. Don't turn your camera on. Just listen to someone's technical skills, ask questions, and listen. And I think that we could really leverage this opportunity and diversify our organizations.
That's excellent, Anna, and some really great ideas, in terms of how we can address and understand the unconscious bias and try to eliminate it, from being a part of our process. I think, like you said, it's only going to make our companies stronger. So as we're looking at here.
Evan, I'd like to add one more thing. I just want to say that it's hard. I do want to put that out there, that I don't want to act like this is an easy thing to do. In fact, our heuristics and biases keep all of that at bay. So you need some training around this. You need to think about this. You need to be proactive. And hiring and running a diverse organization is more difficult, but it's more profitable and it's better in the long run. So there are real reasons to do it beyond it being the right thing to do.
I think you're spot on, Anna. And I think that everyone recognizes, for the most part, how important it is. But I think it's truly the great leaders and the great businesses that focus on it and they bring it to their leadership table and they discuss it, because it's the elephant in the room at most organizations, that's for sure. So, Anna, we're looking at my profile from how I interview. So I got a lot of great feedback and I will spare everyone from it. But I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And as you see, I'm an open diplomat. So let's talk a little bit more about the different profiles here, Anna. How do you learn how to interview with the opposite style, the complete opposite style? So as you see, I'm an open diplomat examiner, and my colleague is an open reserved diplomat. So Anna, can you talk about the different interview styles and how our hiring managers can use this tool for both internal training and development?
Yeah, absolutely. So Evan, I share your same interview style. I am also an open diplomat, which means that we are highly extroverted. If you see there on the right side of the screen, extroversion is all the way towards the right, and your accommodating style is you're highly accommodating as well. So open diplomats, a hallmark of that style is that they prioritize making a personal connection in the interview. They want to be liked. In fact, open diplomats really like interviews. As an open diplomat myself and someone who created the interview styles and hypothesized about this, I know, embarrassed to admit, but a little surprised that not everyone likes interviews as much as I do. So that is one main difference in your polar opposite, which would be on the other side of the diagram here, a reserved examiner. Reserved examiners are highly introverted and more steadfast. So they prioritize not making a personal connection and not making a good impression. A good impression to them means showing that they're qualified, that they can do the job, and they'll talk about the facts, the figures, and the details. Whereas an open diplomat like you and myself will talk more about how we get the job done and our connections and our likability. In fact, if you were to ask an open diplomat after an interview, how did it go? They'd probably say, great, they liked me. Whereas a reserved examiner would say, great, they thought I could do the job. So that's one way that you can see the differences between those two styles. The other two styles are an open examiner and a reserved diplomat. An open examiner is also highly extroverted, but unlike you and me, Evan, they prioritize mastery. So they are really constrained by integrity. The facts are the facts. They need to talk out pretty much every interview answer that they have. They have a tendency to be long-winded, and they're really constrained by this need to get it right and be seen as an authority figure or a subject matter expert. And reserved diplomats are their polar opposite. They are introverted and very diplomatic, like open diplomats. They are harmonizers, collaborators. When it comes to interviews, they are generally the hiring managers that don't talk very much. As job seekers, they are the people that wait for the cues for the hiring manager and they follow what other people tell them. Unlike open examiners that will put a stake in the ground and tell you who they are, reserved diplomats are very much more wait before they act and wait before they really share any opinions or how they might be a good fit. So that's sort of a quick, brief overview. If I had to describe the styles in one sentence, I would say an open diplomat wants to be liked. An open examiner, I want to be me. A reserved examiner wants to get it right. And a reserved diplomat wants to adapt. I hope that describes them for you.
It absolutely does, Anna. And I know that you'll be available to further explain these to anyone that may want, a private conversation or just a consultation. So we appreciate that. And you did a great job explaining those. So, Anna, I have one more question that I'd like to ask for you. And then I've got a couple that are coming in from the field. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time and make sure that we get to their questions as well. And Anna, my question is, we talk about using this tool to train our candidates prior to them interviewing with clients, right? Can you shed some light on how we can better prepare candidates? We've talked a lot about hiring managers, but there's so many candidates that could benefit from just learning a little bit more about how they're presenting themselves and how they can really be their best selves in an interview.
Yeah, so I conducted over 5,000 interviews, and when we were developing the research around these interview styles, I conducted interviews with 1,200 people after they took the assessment. I think that a primary kind of human concern in the interview process is, what impression am I truly making? And I didn't want to just write a book with generalized advice. And sure, you can go and do a mock interview, or you can even record yourself on your phone and play it back and make some assumptions. But what our profile does to help job seekers is that we give them insight into what impression they're making, their approach and style, and how they can shift. We also provide 4 pre-interview coaching exercises for someone to do some pre-coaching work. We have a lot of other resources on our website, shiftprofile.com. And we want job seekers to be able to do this work themselves that you would get by hiring an expensive career coach. That it's all really here in this workbook for you to self-study and really get to know yourself. And in my experience with students and clients, corporate clients and college students, I think the theme is the same. They get their profile and they say, oh my gosh, I feel so validated now. I didn't know that this was a thing, but this is how I interview. And now I have some tools. I knew I was kind of a people pleaser, or I knew I would have a tendency to say things to make people happy, but what if I could tap into my polar opposite? And what if I see someone else's interview style and see some things that I like that maybe I can emulate? It gives you a language and it gives you tools on how to actually prepare in a deep and meaningful way beyond, here are some popular interview questions, what are your weaknesses? Because I encourage clients and candidates to become the best versions of themselves, I don't want everyone to just become a charming extrovert, because that's what we prefer in interviews. We don't need any more of that.
That's great, Anna. And I do want to just take some time to ask you some of the questions from the field. But before I turn to that, Anna, I will just say I was thoroughly impressed by how easy it was to take your assessment. Really did not take very much time at all. But like you said, for a lot of the college students you work with, they're shocked by how spot on it was. I was just in utter disbelief. I felt like it was me to a T, and it was very easy to take. So I appreciate the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, thank you. That's probably the best compliment, we could get. And that's most important to me in developing this and in doing the research. I really want this to be really accurate. We're really proud of that. Our reliability and validity studies, we're proud that this is backed in research and science. It's far from a horoscope.
That's great. So Anna, our first question is, what do you think is the best approach for a talent acquisition team when communicating with the hiring managers, given our current state today of recruiting, and there's mixed messaging coming from the executive team? So to recap, what's the best approach that you could possibly offer for a talent acquisition team to work with the hiring managers, similar to what we discussed earlier, when there's mixed messaging coming from potentially the executive team?
You mean when the C-suite's telling you one thing and you have to do another, you have different marching orders? As HR business partners and talent acquisition teams, we are often found in a very interesting position. We are behind the scenes. We have the CEO's ear, or the HR director lets us in on the real reasons we're doing things, but then our marching orders publicly have to be something else. Is that what you're getting at, Evan?
That is, yeah, I believe that captures the question perfectly.
I just feel as though it's the essence of doing the job. And I think that you can do it diplomatically. And I think that as long as you're doing things ethically and you're doing the right thing, there is a good way to go about it. And like I said earlier, communicate as much as you can and let people know as much as you can in a very honest way. But it's hard. It is hard to know some of these things coming down from the C-suite, but then having to deliver it in a different way. And that is the nature of our jobs.
Thank you, Anna. And the last question that we have from the field is, could including a more diverse decision makers and interviewers in the hiring process possibly decrease the amount of unconscious bias? And is that a potential solution?
You mean decreasing the interview teams?
Yes, and adding a more diverse interview team potentially.
Yeah, so there's some really cool research about this, and I love this study. So imagine a homogeneous group of people, 10 or 15 Caucasian men, which also imagine that being the board at most organizations and the C-suite, right? Now, the study they conducted was, what things do these people share with one another? And what they found is that a homogeneous group of people overemphasize all the things that they have in common. In fact, they're not as creative and they don't come up with unique solutions and they are not innovative. Now, when you add a younger person, an African American or a woman to the mix, the level of creativity goes up because the willingness for everyone to share goes up. Now, this goes against our heuristics and biases, but what it tells us is that we are more likely to share and to be ourselves when there's a diverse group of people. Now, if that doesn't inspire you to want to have diverse people in your company, I don't know what will. But yes, to the person's question, if you have a diverse interview team, you are less likely to have the bias. Also, if you have an accountability partner, someone to hold you to the things that you wanted before you met candidates, that's going to be even better. But diversity in a room, especially when you're making decisions will increase everything, especially creativity. So whatever you can do, make sure you're not in a yes room with people that are the same age, race, and gender.
Awesome. Well, Anna, I am going to throw it back over to Lauren, but before I do, I want to thank you so much for your profound candor, your honesty, and your expertise. It's been a pleasure working with you, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great, and please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to meet everyone virtually, since that might be the only way we can do it for a while.
Nowadays. Yes, thank you both, Evan and Anna. I truly appreciate the chance to introduce you all to Anna Papalia and learn more about her view of how to better prepare HR and talent acquisition teams during this pause, along with her unique and innovative approach to prepare both candidates and hiring managers for the interview process. I really enjoyed learning about their proprietary assessment and methodologies. I also really value the depth and approach Evan took because it really opened the dialogue and caused us to think differently and bridge more gaps in hiring better people. I will be reaching out to a select few of you who will be chosen to receive a free shift profile in consultation with Anna. I had a chance to personally take the assessment and connect with Anna, and it was definitely me. Very cool to see the results. Before we close, I would like to take a minute to explain and reiterate that CSS is launching HR webinars and will be showcasing various subject matters that are aimed at helping the HR leaders navigate through uncharted waters. If you are passionate about HR and want to be included in our series, please reach out to any of us here at CSS. And it is also with great excitement that I share our search team, managed by Abby Prince, will be launching a webinar this Thursday at 11 a.m. Topic is titled Managing, Motivating, and Keeping Your Sales Team Focused Remotely during COVID-19. You will learn many solid tips from our veteran Senior VP of Sales, who has managed up to 100 remote and in-house sales reps. A recording will be posted on our website and emailed out to all of you today, along with the slides. Contact information for both Anna and Evan will also be included. Thank you all for your time today, and please stay healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.